I know you've been warned, but what happened next will blow your mind. Meet Catherine, a woman who raised a gorilla from a young age. But after years of separation, she was told it was too dangerous to meet him again. Why? Because gorillas are wild animals, and you never know how they'll react to humans after they've been separated for so long. Catherine was told not to take the risk, but the bond they shared was too strong. Despite the warnings, Catherine decided to face her past and reunite with the animal that had once been her constant companion. She arrived at the sanctuary, her heart pounding. The air felt heavy, charged with a mix of excitement and anxiety. It had been years since they last saw each other, and so much had changed. Could the gorilla even remember her? Could the bond they shared still be there? Catherine took a deep breath and walked into the enclosure. Standing on the other side of the fence, the massive figure of the gorilla came into view. His fur was darker now, and his muscles rippled with raw power as he moved. His eyes, however, held a look that made Catherine's heart race. Was that recognition? She couldn't tell. The animal before her was no longer the playful, curious baby she had raised. He was a grown male, towering, and his presence was imposing. The caretaker who had been with the gorilla for years stood by, watching closely. He's not the same anymore, the caretaker warned Catherine. He's not the baby you knew. But Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more here, something deeper. She stepped closer, her hands trembling slightly. The gorilla's eyes followed her every move, and for a moment, there was an eerie silence between them. She called his name softly, her voice barely above a whisper. His ears flicked, and his gaze never wavered. For a second, Catherine thought he might walk away. Instead, something unexpected happened. The gorilla moved forward slowly, cautiously, as if unsure of what to do. Catherine held her breath. Was he going to approach her, or was he going to ignore her completely? He stopped just a few feet away. Then, without warning, he reached out his hand, his large fingers gently touching the fence where Catherine stood. It was a simple gesture, but it was enough to send a rush of emotion through her. Could it be that he remembered her? That the bond was still there? Catherine's heart swelled as she extended her own hand toward him, her fingers brushing against the rough surface of the fence. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The world around them faded away. All that mattered was this connection between human and animal, a bond formed years ago that had survived the passage of time. But just as she thought this moment couldn't get any more emotional, the gorilla did something that no one expected. He pulled his hand away and took a step back, his eyes still locked onto hers. Catherine's heart dropped. Was this the end of their connection? Or was there more to come? What he did next left everyone in shock, proving that sometimes animals understand us better than we understand them. As Catherine slowly retracted her hand, she felt a rush of uncertainty. What had just happened? Was that a sign of recognition, or was it simply the gorilla's curiosity about this strange human before him? The silence between them stretched on, thick with tension. The caretaker, who had been quietly observing from a distance, took a cautious step forward. He's not the same as he used to be, the caretaker repeated, his voice soft but firm. Catherine didn't want to accept that. She couldn't. She refused to believe that the connection they once shared had disappeared entirely. This was the same gorilla she had raised, the one who had followed her around like a shadow when he was just a baby. But now, he was different, older, wiser, and perhaps, in some strange way, more distant. Catherine's heart raced. She wasn't sure what she expected, but she knew she had to try again. She took another step closer to the fence, her eyes locked onto the gorilla's. He stood there, motionless, as if waiting for her to make the next move. The air felt electric, charged with a tension that Catherine couldn't explain. She slowly called his name once more. Bobo, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. It had been so long since she had said his name. The gorilla's ears twitched. For a split second, his eyes softened, just a little. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. Could it be? Was he remembering her? Slowly, cautiously, Bobo took another step toward the fence. This time, it wasn't hesitant. It wasn't like before when he pulled back. No, now he seemed determined, as if something inside him had shifted. His eyes never left hers as he stepped closer and closer. Catherine's heart swelled with emotion. She couldn't believe it. Bobo was coming toward her. The once feared gorilla, now standing inches away from her, was moving as though he recognized her. She reached out her hand again, her fingers trembling as they neared the bars of the fence. Bobo stopped just before they could touch, his large, powerful frame hovering mere inches from her own hand. The moment felt surreal. Time seemed to slow as Catherine stared into his eyes. She could see the wisdom in his gaze, the years of life he had lived since she last saw him. But in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. The bond was still there. Then, without warning, Bobo did something unexpected. He reached out with his long fingers, gently brushing against the fence where Catherine's hand was poised. It was a soft touch, almost tentative, but it was enough to send a wave of emotion flooding through her. Catherine felt tears welling in her eyes. She had dreamed of this moment for so long, and now, here it was, happening right in front of her. But just as quickly as the moment had come, Bobo pulled back. He stepped away from the fence, turning his back to her. Catherine's heart sank. Had she pushed too hard? Had she scared him away? She stood there, frozen, unsure of what to do next. The caretaker watched the exchange carefully, his eyes narrowing in thought. For a long moment, there was silence. Catherine stood still, waiting for any sign, any indication that Bobo still recognized her. And then, just as she was about to turn away in defeat, something incredible happened. Bobo slowly turned around and, to Catherine's amazement, he reached out again. This time not to the fence, but to her. With a soft grunt, he extended his hand as if offering it to her, a silent invitation. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. Was this his way of saying he remembered her? That he had not forgotten the bond they once shared? Her heart swelled with hope as she stepped forward, this time closing the distance between them. She reached her hand toward his, her fingers brushing against the rough, thick skin of his palm. The moment felt like it lasted forever, yet it passed in an instant. The world seemed to fade away as Catherine and Bobo stood there, hands barely touching, but with an understanding that went deeper than words. Bobo's eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time in years, Catherine felt a sense of peace wash over her. This was not the same gorilla she had known as a child, but in some way, it was. The connection was still there. It had never truly left. Catherine stood there, her heart racing as she gazed at Bobo. The moment that had just unfolded between them was more than she could have ever dreamed. It wasn't just a reunion. It was a validation of everything she had believed about their bond. But as she looked into his deep, thoughtful eyes, a sense of uncertainty washed over her. Was this enough? Was this enough to prove that the connection they once shared was still alive? She took a step back, giving Bobo space, unsure of how to proceed. The caretaker, who had been observing the whole exchange, slowly approached her. "You know," he said, his voice gentle, "you've seen something rare today. Not many people get to experience this kind of connection with an animal. You're lucky." Catherine nodded, though the words felt hollow in her ears. She wasn't sure if luck had anything to do with it. All she knew was that Bobo was the one who had reached out to her, and that meant more than anything. After a few more moments of silent reflection, Catherine decided to try again. She looked at Bobo, who had settled a few feet away, his body relaxed, his eyes still watching her. Slowly, she walked toward him again, her movements measured and calm. She didn't want to rush it this time. She needed to respect his pace. As she neared the fence, she hesitated for a moment. She could see the slight twitch of Bobo's ears. Was that recognition? Was it curiosity? Or perhaps a bit of both? Catherine held her breath and spoke again, this time more confidently. "Bobo," she whispered, her voice carrying a note of reassurance. "It's me, Catherine. Do you remember?" For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then, just as she began to doubt herself, Bobo took a small step forward. Catherine's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Slowly, carefully, she reached her hand toward him once more. This time, the space between them seemed smaller, more manageable. She didn't feel the same level of fear as before, but there was still an undercurrent of uncertainty. She knew Bobo was no longer the playful cub she had once raised, but was there still a flicker of the young animal who had been her constant companion? As her fingers gently brushed against the fence, Bobo did something that made Catherine's heart swell with emotion. He reached his hand through the bars, stretching as far as he could. For a moment, the two of them were connected, separated only by a few inches of metal. Bobo's hand, though large and powerful, was surprisingly gentle. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. It wasn't an outburst of affection, but it was something just as meaningful, a silent acknowledgement, a recognition that something still existed between them. For the next few minutes, they stood there, hands almost touching, as Catherine felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. It wasn't the dramatic reunion she had imagined in her dreams, but it was real. And for her, that was enough. As the caretaker looked on, a soft smile played at the corner of his lips. He had seen many animal reunions in his time, but there was something uniquely special about this one. It wasn't just a reunion of human and animal. It was a moment of understanding, of shared history, and most importantly, of trust being rebuilt, one gentle touch at a time. Catherine slowly stepped back, her eyes still locked on Bobo. He didn't move away. Instead, he stood there, watching her with a calm, almost thoughtful expression. "Thank you," Catherine whispered under her breath, though she wasn't sure if he could understand the words. But, in her heart, she knew he did. Catherine stood still, watching Bobo as he remained where she had left him, eyes locked onto hers. There was something different about him now, something more tranquil. Perhaps it was the understanding they had reached, the bridge between the past and present slowly being rebuilt. Catherine felt a sense of peace settle over her, but it wasn't just the reunion that filled her with this calm. It was the way Bobo had responded to her. His initial hesitance had faded, replaced by a quiet acknowledgement of her presence. The caretaker, who had been standing quietly by, smiled softly, sensing the unspoken connection between them. "You did it," he said, his voice low but sincere. "It's not easy. Most animals wouldn't react this way after so long. You've done something special." Catherine smiled, but it was bittersweet. She wasn't sure if this was the closure she had hoped for, but it felt right. Bobo, once her companion, now seemed like a different being, one who had grown beyond the playful cub she had raised. He was more than that now. He was a fully grown gorilla, one who had lived through countless experiences, each shaping him into the creature before her. Still, despite the years and the changes, there was something undeniably familiar in the way he looked at her. As the minutes passed, Catherine hesitated. Should she try again to get closer, or had she pushed enough for today? Bobo had shown her a kindness that she hadn't expected, but she wasn't sure how far to take it. She slowly took another step forward, her movements deliberate. Her heart raced in anticipation. This was the moment that would either deepen their bond or push them further apart. She stopped just a few feet away, watching Bobo carefully. His expression was unreadable, but his posture was relaxed. His large frame was steady, almost serene, as though he was waiting for her next move. Catherine took a deep breath and spoke again, her voice soft. "I'm not here to hurt you, Bobo. I just want you to know that I never wanted to leave you. I'm sorry." The words tumbled out, almost as if they had been trapped inside her for years. The caretaker watched quietly, sensing the weight of the moment. But Bobo did not react. He simply stood there, eyes never leaving hers. The silence stretched between them, and Catherine began to wonder if she was asking for too much. Then, as if on cue, Bobo slowly lowered his head. It was a small gesture, but to Catherine, it felt like a sign. She wasn't sure what it meant, but it was something. Maybe it was a signal that he understood her, or maybe it was a sign that he wasn't as distant as she had feared. She cautiously took a few more steps forward, closer to the fence. As she reached out, her hand trembling, Bobo did something that stunned her. He reached out to her again, his large fingers brushing against the bars of the fence. The gesture was slow, deliberate, as though he was offering something more than just his touch. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. Could it be? Was he reaching for her once more? She reached her hand toward his, her heart beating faster. The moment felt surreal, like something out of a dream. She wasn't sure if he could understand her words, but there was no doubt in her mind that this was a moment of pure connection. She reached her fingers through the fence, and for a brief moment, she felt the warmth of Bobo's touch. He didn't pull away. He didn't hesitate. In that instant, Catherine felt the weight of all the years, all the lost time, slip away. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the fairy tale reunion she had imagined. But it was real, and it was enough. Bobo slowly stepped back, his eyes still locked onto hers. Catherine stood still, her hand lingering in the air for a moment before she withdrew it. There was no need for words now. The bond they once shared had returned, but it was different, more powerful, more profound than before. As she turned to leave, Catherine glanced back one last time. Bobo stood there, watching her, a silent understanding passing between them. She didn't know what the future held for them, but in that moment, she knew they had come full circle, and that, in itself, was enough. Catherine walked slowly toward the gate of the sanctuary, her mind racing. The encounter with Bobo had been everything she had hoped for and more. The touch of his hand, the connection they had shared, was something she would never forget. She had wondered if the bond would still be there, after all the years and the distance. But now, standing outside the enclosure, she knew that something deeper had been rekindled. It wasn't just a reunion. It was a reminder of the unspoken understanding they had always shared. The caretaker, who had watched the entire exchange, approached her quietly. "You did well today," he said, his voice soft but sincere. "Not many humans get that kind of response from a gorilla. You've earned his trust." Catherine smiled, but it was a bittersweet smile. She didn't feel like she had done anything extraordinary. She had just wanted to reconnect with the animal that had been such a big part of her life. But hearing the caretaker's words made her realize just how rare this moment had been. "It didn't feel like work," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "It felt like coming home." The caretaker nodded in understanding. "I can see that. You've always had a special bond with him. It's clear now that it hasn't faded, even after all these years." Catherine took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She had been so caught up in the emotions of the moment that she hadn't really thought about the future. What did this mean for her and Bobo? Could they truly rebuild the connection they once had? Or was this just a fleeting moment in time? She wasn't sure, but she couldn't ignore the feeling that something had changed between them. As she turned to leave the sanctuary, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. It was a strange feeling, one that she hadn't experienced in years. She had always carried the guilt of leaving Bobo behind, of not being there for him when he needed her. But now, as she walked away, she realized that maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe there was still time to rebuild what they had lost. Days passed, and Catherine couldn't shake the memory of Bobo's touch. It was always there, lingering in the back of her mind, reminding her of the bond they shared. She couldn't stop thinking about him, about what had happened at the sanctuary. She knew she had to go back. She had to see him again, to understand if what they had was truly something that could be rekindled. So, she made the decision to return. Catherine arrived at the sanctuary early the next morning before the other visitors arrived. She didn't want the distractions of crowds or the pressure of time. She just wanted to be with Bobo, to see if the connection they shared was still there. As she entered the enclosure, she spotted him in the distance, standing by the trees. His large frame was unmistakable, and Catherine's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't noticed her yet, and she stood there for a moment, taking in the sight of him. It felt surreal, like she had stepped into a dream. The silence of the morning was broken only by the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. Catherine slowly walked toward him, her steps deliberate. This time, she wouldn't rush. She would let him come to her, if he wanted to. As she got closer, Bobo turned and locked eyes with her. For a moment, neither of them moved. It was as if time had stopped. Catherine held her breath, waiting for his reaction. And then, just as she thought he might walk away, he took a step toward her. It wasn't a fast movement, but it was enough to make her heart race. He was coming toward her. Catherine slowly extended her hand, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached out. Bobo hesitated for a moment, then reached out with his own hand. For the second time in as many days, they stood there, hands almost touching, the connection between them palpable. Catherine's heart swelled with emotion. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment that proved that their bond was not just a memory. It was still alive, still strong. And as their hands finally met through the bars of the fence, Catherine knew, without a doubt, that she had made the right decision. This was just the beginning of a new chapter for her and Bobo. Catherine returned to the sanctuary the next morning, her mind filled with a quiet sense of anticipation. The moment she had shared with Bobo was still fresh in her memory, but there was something more she needed to know. Could the connection they had rebuilt truly last? Was it just a fleeting moment, or could they move forward together? The sun had just begun to rise, casting a warm golden glow over the sanctuary. It was peaceful, almost serene. Catherine walked through the familiar paths, her footsteps soft against the earth. As she approached the enclosure where Bobo lived, her heart began to race. She knew he was somewhere nearby. She could feel his presence even before she saw him. And then, just ahead, she spotted him. Bobo was standing by the edge of the trees, his back to her. He was still, almost statuesque, as if waiting for her. Catherine hesitated for a moment, but then she took a deep breath and walked closer. She didn't want to rush him, but there was a part of her that couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. Would he remember her again today? Would he be as open to their connection as he had been yesterday? As she got closer, Bobo turned around. Their eyes met, and once again, time seemed to slow. Catherine held her breath. This time, there was no hesitation. Bobo took a step toward her, his large form moving with purpose. His eyes never left hers. Catherine felt her heart beat faster as he came closer, but she stood still, waiting. When he was just a few feet away, Bobo reached out with his hand. Catherine did the same, her fingers trembling as they moved toward him. And just like that, their hands touched once more. It wasn't a dramatic moment, but it was everything. The connection between them felt deeper now, stronger. They stood there, side by side, hands pressed together through the fence, both silently understanding that something important was happening. Catherine closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. She had never expected this. She had come here hoping for a reunion, but now, she realized that what they had was far more than that. It was a bond, one that had survived time and distance. Bobo's hand remained steady against hers, and Catherine felt the warmth of his touch seep through the fence. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. She could feel his strength, his intelligence, and his gentleness all at once. This wasn't just a wild animal. This was a creature that had known her, had trusted her, and now, once again, seemed to offer that trust. Catherine pulled her hand away slowly, but Bobo didn't move. He stayed there, his eyes locked onto hers, as if silently asking her to stay. She smiled softly, knowing that this moment was exactly what she needed. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long while, Catherine felt at peace. She knew that whatever happened next, she had found something special here, and she wasn't ready to let it go. With one last glance at Bobo, Catherine turned to leave, but not without a sense of hope and gratitude that filled her chest. This wasn't the end of her story with Bobo. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that they would write together. Catherine couldn't stop thinking about the moments she had spent with Bobo. The touch of his hand, the way he looked at her, it all felt like a dream. She knew there was so much more to discover, but a part of her felt uncertain. Had they truly bridged the gap between the years that had passed? Or was she simply clinging to the hope that the bond they once shared would be enough to heal the distance between them? The days following their reunion were filled with mixed emotions. Catherine found herself returning to the sanctuary more often, but each time, it felt like a step into the unknown. Every visit brought a sense of anticipation, but also a quiet anxiety. Would Bobo continue to respond to her? Or had the connection they shared been a one-time miracle? On one particular morning, Catherine arrived early, just as the sun was beginning to rise. The sanctuary was still, the air cool and fresh. As she walked along the familiar path, she could hear the sounds of the animals in the distance. Birds chirping, the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. It was peaceful, almost surreal. But the peace was fleeting as she reached the enclosure where Bobo spent his time. He was there, as usual, standing near the fence, his back to her. Catherine paused for a moment, watching him. He had grown even more majestic since their last encounter. His fur gleamed in the morning light, and his powerful frame seemed to command the space around him. But it was his eyes that caught Catherine's attention. They were focused, intense, as though he was waiting for something, or someone. Catherine took a deep breath and walked toward him, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure what she expected, but as she drew closer, she felt a rush of emotions flood through her. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. Would Bobo remember her again today? Would he respond the same way as before? When she was only a few feet away, Bobo turned. His gaze met hers, and for a moment, neither of them moved. It was as if the world had stopped, and all that mattered was this moment between them. Catherine held her breath, waiting for him to make the first move. Slowly, Bobo took a step toward her. Catherine's heart skipped a beat. Was he coming to her? The hesitation she had felt before seemed to have disappeared, replaced by a quiet understanding. As he approached, Catherine extended her hand, just as she had done before. This time, she didn't feel the same nervousness. She knew he was coming to her in his own way. When their hands finally met, the feeling was different. It was more certain, more solid. The bond they had shared before had never really left. It had just been waiting, like a spark, to be reignited. For a moment, they stood there, hand in hand, without a word spoken. There was no need for words. The connection between them was clear. Bobo's hand was gentle against hers, his grip firm but calm. Catherine felt the warmth of his touch, and for the first time in years, she felt completely at peace. This was the reunion she had longed for. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in that moment, Catherine knew that whatever happened next, they had found something special, a bond that couldn't be broken by time or distance. As they stood there, the caretaker watched from a distance, a quiet smile on his face. He had seen many animal-human reunions, but none quite like this one. It wasn't just about the reunion. It was about the understanding, the connection, the trust that had been built over the years. It was a rare and beautiful thing. Slowly, Catherine withdrew her hand, but she didn't feel the need to say anything. The moment had spoken for itself. She knew that she had found something worth holding on to, something worth fighting for. And as she turned to leave, she glanced back at Bobo, who was still standing by the fence, watching her. For the first time in a long while, Catherine felt a sense of certainty about the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew that Bobo would always be a part of her life, just as she would always be a part of his. Catherine couldn't help but smile as she walked away from Bobo's enclosure, her heart light. The sense of peace she had felt in that moment was still with her. It wasn't just about the touch of his hand. It was about something deeper, something that words couldn't express. For the first time in years, she felt connected to him in a way that went beyond the past and present. It was as if their bond had always been there, just waiting to be rekindled. The days that followed were full of quiet reflection for Catherine. She had returned to the sanctuary every day, but it wasn't the same. Bobo greeted her with the same calm, steady presence that had made her feel so at home. Each visit brought a deeper understanding between them, and the connection grew stronger with each passing day. But as much as Catherine felt that bond, she knew that there was still so much to learn. The time they had together was precious, and she didn't want to take it for granted. So she took things slow. She didn't rush their encounters or try to push Bobo into anything he wasn't ready for. She let him come to her when he was ready, and in return, she gave him the space to be himself. As she spent more time with him, Catherine began to realize that Bobo was not the same gorilla she had known as a child. He was older, wiser, and more reserved, but there was still a spark in him, a spark of the playful, curious creature he had once been. And that spark was enough. It was enough to remind her of the bond they had shared all those years ago. It was enough to make her believe that, despite everything that had changed, there was still something worth fighting for. One afternoon, as Catherine sat by the edge of the enclosure, watching Bobo interact with the other animals, she felt a surge of emotion. She had come to the sanctuary to find closure, to make peace with the past, but what she had found was so much more. She had found a friend, a companion, and a bond that could not be broken by time or distance. For the first time in a long while, Catherine felt truly grateful. Grateful for the moments she had spent with Bobo, grateful for the lessons he had taught her, and grateful for the love and trust they had rebuilt together. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the sanctuary, Catherine stood up and took one last look at Bobo. He was watching her, his eyes soft and steady, and in that moment, she knew that no matter where life took them, they would always be connected. With a deep breath, Catherine turned and walked away, her heart full, knowing that the journey with Bobo was far from over. It was only just beginning. Catherine walked through the sanctuary with a sense of purpose. The days of uncertainty were behind her, and in their place, there was a deep knowing. She and Bobo had found their way back to each other. It hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when she wasn't sure if it would happen. But now, standing at the edge of the enclosure, watching Bobo move gracefully across the grounds, she knew that this bond was unlike anything she had experienced before. Their connection had been rebuilt slowly, layer by layer, like a delicate tapestry that needed time to weave itself together. But every visit, every shared moment, had brought them closer, and Catherine had come to realize that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Bobo was not the same gorilla he had been when she first met him. He had grown, evolved, and had his own life. But what she had learned was that animals, like people, carry memories with them, memories that shape who they become. Bobo had remembered her, just as she had remembered him. And that was enough. As the days went by, Catherine felt herself becoming more attuned to Bobo's rhythms. She understood his moods, the subtle shifts in his posture, the way his eyes would light up when he saw her. There was a sense of mutual respect between them now, an understanding that neither of them had expected, but both of them needed. On one of her visits, as Catherine sat quietly by the fence, Bobo approached her. His steps were slow, measured, as if he was savoring the moment. He stopped just in front of her, his eyes meeting hers. It was a moment of perfect stillness, as if the world around them had faded into the background. Catherine held her breath, waiting. Then, in the quietest of gestures, Bobo reached out with his hand, resting it gently on the fence. Catherine's heart fluttered. She hadn't expected this, but in that moment, it felt like everything had come full circle. She reached out, placing her hand against the fence, just a few inches from his. For a moment, there was no need for words, no need for explanation. The connection between them spoke louder than anything that could be said. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the sanctuary, Catherine and Bobo stood there, side by side, with only the fence separating them. There was a sense of peace in the air, a quiet understanding that needed no words. Catherine smiled softly, knowing that their journey together was far from over. There would be more visits, more quiet moments of connection, but for now, this was enough. As she turned to leave, Catherine took one last look at Bobo. He stood there, watching her, his eyes calm and steady. For the first time in a long time, Catherine felt a sense of certainty in her heart. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been rewarding. And as she walked away, she knew that she would always carry the memory of this bond with her, no matter where life took her. This was the beginning of something beautiful, a friendship that would last a lifetime.